This is Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, President of Egypt from 1970 to 1981, a leader of the October 1973 war, and later the first Arab head of state to make peace and recognize the State of Israel in 1979. So what does he have to do with anything? Sadat, as he himself recounted, was a Nazi collaborator. So what's the story? In the late 1930s, Anwar Sadat joined Egypt's Royal Military Academy, where he met Gamal Abdel Nasser, Abdel Hakim Amir, and a number of other important figures. These men did not like Britain's influence over Egypt and sought support from London's greatest enemy, Nazi Germany. Sadat, as he says in a 1957 memoir, met and worked with 2 German spies. After working with them, however, his life would take a difficult turn. The operation failed. According to Sadat, he found the 2 German spies, quote, dead drunk with 2 Jewesses, who he says exposed the German spies to the authorities. Such was the environment Egypt found itself in the early 1940s. A country under British occupation, split between pro-Axis and pro-Allied sympathies. This was the Second World War. This is episode 10 of Egypt's recent history. Last episode saw the liberal era, which is in the description. The Second World War was very much part of the liberal era, and Egypt, despite being separated by the sea, was 100% connected to events across the water. The country, as we saw in the last episode, was home to many Italians, French, Germans, and British, in addition to Egyptian Jews and Christians. And besides the cultural connection, there was of course the direct British occupation. The British had much control over the country's defense and foreign policy. This meant that when Hitler's troops entered Poland in 1939, Egypt was automatically involved. From the very beginning, the country was crucial to the British war effort. 2 of the British Empire's most important colonial possessions relied on passage through the Suez Canal. First, of course, you had India, which, as seen in the World War I episode, was an important source of troops and resources for the British Army. And secondly, you had Iranian and Iraqi oil, which the British greatly relied upon. These strategic resources crossed the Suez Canal, making it a target for Germany and the Axis. Egypt's role wasn't just geographic, however. The British were in need of money, and so took out loans from Egypt. This didn't just end all of the debt Egypt owed to Britain. It was now the British who owed millions of pounds to Egypt. All of this meant that from Britain's perspective, losing Egypt may have meant losing the war. The country at the time was home to many Egyptian Jews. One of these Egyptian Jews was named Albert Ari. In his memoirs, he wrote, quote, "The day of France's surrender was a black day at home. It resembled a state of mourning." All that to say that not everyone was supportive of Germany, and it wasn't just the Jews. Taha Hussein, for example, who as seen in the last episode, published several works studying Islam, did not like Hitler. Taha Hussein said, quote, "Hitler is an intellectually limited man who does not like to delve deeply into problems or to reflect in any depth." And Taha Hussein's opinion applied to the rest of the Nazis. That being said, however, with the fall of Paris, it was time for Italy to make its move. Benito Mussolini, who had expanded Italian rule over Libya, launched an invasion into Egypt. Like many of Mussolini's military endeavors, however, this one wouldn't work out. The British would counterattack and take over the city of Benghazi. A few months later, though, in 1941, German troops under the command of Erwin Rommel were sent to Libya, where they eventually pushed the British back. As all of this was happening, one man was watching. One man who had some pro-German sentiment. King Farouk. Not wanting to take any chances, the British forced the king to appoint a pro-British parliament, threatening him with forced abdication if he didn't. Watching this event was a man named Muhammad Naguib and another man named Gamal Abdel Nasser. They were both not happy with the British, and this event, on top of other grievances, would not be forgotten by them. The event was eventually known as the Abdeen Incident. Later on in 1942, the Nazis would make a push into Egypt, successfully pushing the British and their allies back to El Alamein, about 100 kilometers from the city of Alexandria. The British then, led by Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, would successfully push Rommel, the Germans, and the Italians back to Libya. And that was the last of the fighting on Egyptian soil. And with the end of the war in 1945, the Kingdom of Egypt became part of the new global system set up by the United Nations. This new system, however, would see Britain become a much less dominant player than it had been. The global centers of power were now Washington and Moscow. As for Cairo, dislike of the monarchy would reach a tipping point. The late 1940s and early 1950s would be heavily unstable, and the Egyptian military officers who disliked what they saw would now make their move. It was time for a revolution. And that is the next episode. So until then, thank you for watching.